Good day and welcome to Insight. Today we take a deeper insight into a book. It's called Jamaica, Paradise and Paradox. Paul Ivey is the author. We have him here with us. And welcome, Mr. Ivey. Paradise and Paradox. You're talking about Jamaica. What is paradise and what is paradoxical about your paradise?
Good day, Mr. Sharp, and thank you for having me. Jamaica scans as almost bipolar, in that there are two diametrically opposed aspects to the country. We have our paradise in terms of, Jamaica is wonderful in many respects, and then there are the dark sides, the ugly sides, if you will. And so we have that situation, and that's what inspired me to write this book, to cite examples of both scenarios, and also to suggest ways that we can get out of some of the major challenges that we are facing as a country.
Well, let's look at it, the whole philosophy behind paradise. One great author wrote, these are the best of times and these are the worst of times.
Indeed.
We have heard of the yin and the yang, the minus and the plus.
Yes.
You can't have total paradise anywhere in the world apart from when we get to heaven, we're told.
Perhaps, and that philosophy also exercised my mind, that in any given epoch, it's the best of times, it's the worst of times. Except that in our case, we are very good and we are equally bad.
Equally very bad.
Equally very bad. And
Yes.
therein lies the dichotomy and the issue pertaining to us. We are world beaters when it comes to our athletes. When you say anywhere on the planet, you say Bob Marley's name, people automatically say Jamaica on the one hand. And then on the other hand, our murder rate is the highest, among the highest in the world.
Yes.
Those are the kinds of things I'm talking about.
Yes, the contrast. So paradox is this contrast.
Yes, if you look at the physical environment, we know of the 7 miles of white sand beaches in Negril. We have some of the most wonderful resorts there are, in the western end of the country. Eastern Portland was recently in the news, and it's one of the most gorgeous places on earth.
Yes.
So those are the kinds of things I'm talking about. And at the same time, let's take the tourism capital, Montego Bay. States of emergency, continued violence, Zozos, and all of those kind of things.
Yes.
The tourist resorts, for example, have like a constellation of depressed communities around them, and so forth.
Yes.
And at the same time, we have millions of tourists just pouring into Jamaica to come and enjoy Jamaica on the one hand. Some of our urban inner cities are really, challenging environments. So yin and yang, paradise and paradox, the reality of Jamaica is that it scans in this way.
Yes, apparently net paradise. At the end of the day, because people seem to be oblivious to some of the stuff we see and smell because we live here every day.
And it's interesting that you make the point, net paradise, because the thing is that there's more good in Jamaica than there's bad in Jamaica. And what we want, and what I want and would yearn for, is rally Jamaicans, well-thinking Jamaicans, to say, let us make the good eclipse in significant ways the bad about Jamaica.
Yes. But the issue that came up into the book, Jamaica, Paradise and Paradox, one of them, and when I do programs there, I just come straight and as the Lord leads me. Is Jamaica a failed state, or is Jamaica a failing state in light of this paradise and paradox? Are we failing? Have we failed? And that came up with a major issue at one time with a BNS gentleman.
I remember when Bill Clark said it and the kind of responses that were generated. There is a classical definition in the literature for what constitutes a failed state. Nothing works, there's no central government, there's just entire anarchy and so forth. We don't have that in Jamaica, really and truly. However,
Yes.
Jamaica is failing in some significant aspects of the society. That's what I would say.
Yes, but are we not doing well as well? In that we have, through the last two administrations, settled down in terms of bringing back our books together, although we are balancing the books and some will argue that their lives are not being balanced. But at least in terms of an IMF program that we have gotten involved with, we have volunteered for, nobody held a gun at our head,
Yes.
that we have adhered to, and we have showed financial prudence.
You see, the motivation for getting to the IMF program was that we were at the cliff edge. And if we hadn't pulled back, perhaps we would be in a worse situation than we are in now. So I say, and part of the burden of my heart, if you will, is that we, post-independence, could, considering our tremendous potential, could have done so much better as a country, but we haven't. And I put the question in this way in relation to your point about the IMF program. As an independent country, where we are supposed to be in charge of our own affairs, why did it have to take an external body to be our babysitter for us to get our house in order?
We are a part of the IMF.
Well, yes, but not all countries have drawn down and subjected themselves to the stringent conditionalities of the IMF, because left to their own devices, they would not have done it. That's the point I'm making. Yeah. So it necessitated us having a babysitter. And so we have gotten our house in order. But that is in respect of the fiscal situation. As a matter of fact, it also took legislation in the form of the fiscal responsibility framework.
That's right.
To even get that in place. But look at the things that we are responsible for without babysitting: the crime. We do not have an overseer directing us to the actions that are necessary in relation to crime management and crime prevention, and we have seen the results of that. So I'm pushing back to say that, of course the IMF program has yielded results, but why did it have to take a babysitter?
We will ponder that, but let's get back to the issue of the crime thing that you say we need a babysitter for. Your book, True to History,
Yes.
has gone back and shown that we have had an interesting start through our education, where the English persons, the Henry Morgans of this world, the plunderers,
Yes.
have become our leaders. And to this day, Paul Ivey, we are still having the Queen as a titular head of our country. Where do you sit with that? How does it get in your craw to think that we have to go to the Governor General, who must now have a throne speech that reflects the Queen of England, the monarchy?
You say, where does it sit in my craw? It's one of those things that have stuck in my craw. I find it absolutely amazing that we could argue out of one side of our mouth about sovereignty. We're an independent country, and then we swear allegiance to the Queen. Wherein, for example, Jamaicans have to get visas to go to the UK. Our final court is still located in the land of our former colonizers. It is stunning. I said to some of my friends recently in conversation, I would hope that in building our new parliament, are we going to walk into that new edifice and still swear allegiance to the Queen? It is something that is, it's really, I want to use good adjectives on the program.
Go ahead. Go as close to the hedge as you wish.
It's absolutely unacceptable. It's an unacceptable state of affairs, I would argue, and I personally find it offensive as a Jamaican. Yes.
Yes, I might find it shameful myself to think that, but it's going to take referendum to rid ourselves of the monarchy because it's deeply entrenched in our Constitution. It's not one of those things you can go about and say, all right, let's stop paying allegiance to the Queen. Let's go become a republic.
Yes.
Reform. But nobody is going to, I mean, in the 70s there was this championing of that cause,
yes,
but
yes.
it died, and now we cling to the British system as if our blankie is being taken from us.
Indeed, indeed, it is an amazing thing, and I wonder, well, you know, I say it in two ways, that we have to credit our colonizers for being so effective with their ability to mentally trap us still after so many years, but then requiring, being deeply entrenched in the Constitution, requiring a 2/3 majority, I would imagine.
Yes.
If there was anything else beyond the crime situation that required consensus, this would be it. This would be it. There shouldn't be any argument or any resistance from any quarters to say, after centuries of colonization, to be truly independent and to have sovereignty to have real meaning, that we should get rid of this. How could we have, for example, the opening of our parliament, and we're saying that our Governor General, the Queen's representative, is going to present the throne speech in 2019? Yes. It is an abomination, actually.
Yes. Well, what would it take to come to that again? Because it comes off as if, you know, way back in the days with Norman Manley and Bustamante and the whole question of whether you're going to be one Caribbean or not. It takes on this type of political, you know, ought we not to temper that and just say let's do this, or does it require that political passion to get it moving?
As was the case with federation, political opportunism creeps into these things. We saw recently in the Eastern Caribbean, I think it was Antigua and Barbuda, where the opposition leader, just as Bustamante did initially, supported the Federation Bustamante. The opposition leader in Antigua Barbuda supported getting away from the Privy Council and replacing it with the CCJ. But then when he saw how the political winds were blowing, he changed tune. So it is a question of political opportunism, which has been a feature, a negative feature of our politics, and it is something that that has acted to our disadvantage, that political opportunism. How do we change this? I'm an educator. I'm in my 36th year now as an educator. And I've looked at our education system, and I've found that it is the source of some of these kinds of things that we see. Because we replicate, basically, some of these things. I remember when the Queen was celebrating the 50th anniversary of her reign, there was a little clip from a school in rural Jamaica where the kids were being led into singing the praises of the Queen for her 50th anniversary. So when you have situations like those taking place in our schools, you can see the perpetuation of and the retention of this umbilical connection and this admiration for our colonial masters of the past.
Yes, we're going to take a break from Insight. When we come back, we want to deal with some other serious issues. Don't go away. Paul Ivey is here, and he has a book that we're going to talk about. Welcome back to Insight. Today we take a deeper look in the book called Jamaica, Paradise and Paradox. Paul Ivey, he is the author, And we're going to discuss, you know, I found the reading very interesting, quite frankly. I got a sense that it really wasn't a book, but it really was current affairs. It measured up to, when I was like, how you got that in there and it's a book? You know, it's almost like I'm reading the news, you know. But there you are. But it has some serious references and speak to Jamaica doing what is the right thing and what wasn't the right thing. One of the things, though, sir, you took a historical perspective
Yes.
on Paradise. You pointed out to us that, listen, a lot of the things that we're struggling with, not as an excuse, but as an explanation to what we're going. Historically, could we have gone a different route?
As a country. Okay, the historical perspective is this. What is the context within which one is describing and looking at Jamaica at the moment? Because the thing is, we have been told, you know, that, you know, if you don't understand your history, you are unlikely to, you're likely to lose your way. And also what I find as an educator, as an academic, that history illuminates the past. It tells you about the present within context, and it gives you the opportunity to chart the future in an informed way. So I thought, as I mentioned in the break, that being a post-independence born person, I was born in 1963, just after independence, and looking at the promise of independence, the euphoria that swept the country. The late Troy Keane described it in a Gleaner article, you know, the Venerable Gleaner.
Yes.
And looking at the euphoria, the promise of independence and nationhood, and how it is that we have veered off course. Whereas we can be a superpower, I think Jamaica has the opportunity or the possibilities of being a country of its size that has the prospects of being a superpower. We're already a cultural superpower. We dominate the world in many things, music, you know, athletics and so forth. So we're veered off course. And the question of how our history and how we haven't come to grips with certain aspects of our history, those are still bedeviling us as we go forward as a country. The education system needs to be decolonized, for example. Certain aspects of the social architecture of Jamaica is largely the same as how it was circa and before emancipation.
Help me. The education system has to be decolonized. Is the head you're talking about?
Yes.
A deep search of that.
It is the mental landscape that the action needs to occur on. One of the things that I have found in looking at Garvey in terms of the is acute understanding of where he needed to start his project of racial pride, identity, empowerment for black people. Garvey realized that he had to start with consciousness raising. Consciousness raising, it's almost as if persons are in a semi-unconscious state, and you have to get into their minds and stir it up and wake them and say, look man, look, you can't be so distracted and so in this kind of semi-drunk state, as it were.
Yes.
So I have found myself in a state of affairs now in terms of, you know, my own personal outlook on life. What can I do with the opportunities that I've gotten in Jamaica? What can I do with my experience as an educator and what the insights and perspectives that I have gained, rather than perpetuating what the system has set up to perpetuate? Can I change it by virtue of building awareness among our people? That's where I see myself going from henceforth.
I'm going to do this to you, Mr. Educator.
Yes.
You know you all like to set exams for students and give them exams. I'm going to give you one now. I put it to you that our motto speaks to almost like a mission statement. Out of many, one people is one of the biggest sham that has ever happened to Jamaica, and it is a part of the colonial mess that needs to be cleaned up. In that, Black people can't even talk about black people because you see that you're being racist. We have an East Portland situation the other day. If you raise certain things, that is, in other words, we can't ruffle the feathers. Let's just calm down. Let's forget that these things, inequities occurred. It is a biggest sham. Explain. Why not?
Black people are the only ones who are told to get over it. Nobody tells any other historically discriminated races that they should get over it. They've gotten their reparations in the case of the Holocaust and so forth, but in the case of black people's Holocaust enslavement, forget it, get over it. We're not apologizing, we're not paying any reparations. All right. As an academic, I cite the works of other academicians. I look at what my other scholars have done, and I put my own perspective to bear on my interpretations thereof. The matter of the motto,
yes.
Out of many, one people. I actually agree with the point of view that it is a hoax. And it is a hoax that was meant to keep people comfortable. It was an illusion to say that, look, man, in fact, why it was done was to keep the plantocracy happy. To say that, look, these people, we will make them think that they are part of one big society, and so they will not, your possessions and what you have historically inherited will not be at risk. So I agree that it is actually an illusion, because the architecture of the society remains the case that those who are in the majority, 90% of Jamaicans, are of African extraction, black people, but they occupy the lower strata of the society.
Well, let's play devil's advocate as if he needs any more advocates. What else could have happened in that you have a nation to lead, you need them to settle down? If you had anything suggesting racial division, Jamaica would not be as peaceful as it relates to racial classes. Classism is high, you know, you jump it by all kinds of means. But the alternative to out of many one people, I'm not sure what that would be.
Frederick Douglass told us that power structures do not yield power voluntarily. The most earnest desire of privileged people and those of the privileged classes, their most earnest desire is to retain their privilege. That's their most earnest desire. So how do you treat with that situation? You basically cannot tinker with some of these things. They have to be smashed. Yes, they have to be smashed. Because left to their own devices, you will see some illusionary changes, incrementalism, but the basic nature remains the same. So they have to be smashed. And that is why when we had what I would say was our most audacious social engineer, Michael Manley. What he attempted to do, now look, I know that this is going to generate a lot of commentary in terms of, you know, because Manley has equal admirers and equal detractors. Yes. Manley was not perfect, and he made lots of mistakes and so forth. But his basic approach in terms of intent and what he had attempted to do in rebalancing the society. Where I grew up, you know, there was a property that as far as we could see was owned by one person in that area. As far as you could look and see. The land reform as an issue. We have, remember now, you know, at emancipation, when they throw the previously enslaved persons off the plantations, they came off with nothing, nothing. So when you look at the historical ownership of land, and I am not excusing illegal occupation, but you can't divorce from history the fact that now we have 700,000 persons illegally occupying property in Jamaica. The history explains some of it. Property ownership was also tied to the vote. The vestries that were the precursors of parish councils, they conspired to pass laws to tie the vote to property ownership.
So they have a by-election, BUI election, long time.
You said it, you said it. So the historical structures, it is structural. And if you don't smash this structure, you will just be tinkering.
The issue of leadership and how we get out of that. We speak to education as, you know, 'cause what you said is really, really major. We have to decolonize our education.
Yes.
But it's going to require leadership. You pointed to a Michael Manley and his dream. Is there that leader around?
One of the things that I think is lacking in Jamaica now is a lack of big thinking. I don't see big thinking, you know, broad strokes, revolutionary things that's going to have intergenerational effects. You see a bit of tinkering. You might see a highway here and a highway there. Those are physical infrastructure, and they are good. But that's not where the action needs to be. It is in the development of our people and in the consciousness raising of our people. And that is why scholars, for example, like Paulo Freire, who speaks to the pedagogy of the oppressed, and how it is that the fundamental purpose of education must be for the liberation of the historically oppressed. Julius Nyerere had that same point of view and philosophy, because the thing is, any sustainable development initiative has to be connected to your education system.
Indeed. Going to ask you to hold that. We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back on Insight. Welcome back to Insight. Paul Ivey is his name. He's written several books, among them this one that we're discussing, Jamaica Paradise and Paradox. You can see it in the screen behind me. But let's do what we need to get before us. You mentioned that the task of Norman Manley, as he pointed out, was to get our political independence. And I argue that we are not really political independent as yet. And we still say Madam Queen, Madam Monarchy. I still argue that we have not concluded the political independence.
Yes.
So we can say what we want to say. But as far as I'm concerned, we have not finished that journey. But you have mentioned that the leaders since him, we have failed in that we have not gone to the economic independence.
Yes.
You of P.J. Patterson, you mentioned that he has spent 18 years and he has a lot to give account for. Of the current Prime Minister, Mr. Holness, you mentioned things to the effect that he's not a transformational leader. He has promised things like, work description for the MPs that is yet to come. He's a procrastinator. It comes to the Chief Justice and the appointment and the whole issue there, the whole question of Petrojam. And this book is, I'm here to tell you, is topical.
Yes,
because
yes.
So if you understand that, one of the things, I trust I have impressed you that I've read the book, but above and beyond that, is where do we go in terms of that transition to economic independence and our failed leadership, collectively orange and green, that we failed. Where do we go? What's required?
On the leadership question, I held out tremendous hope for Prime Minister Holness as a post-independence born leader, born in 1972. So I am of the view that he would have seen all of what had gone on before and what other leaders from other generations did, and the adverse consequences of some of these things. I had tremendous hope that he would be truly new and different and transformational. I think that he is underestimating the tremendous goodwill, reservoir of goodwill that exists in the society for him to take strong actions to right the ship. I think he has the possibility, the opportunity of being the Lee Kuan Yew of Jamaica.
Singapore man.
Yes, but he needs to take those bold actions, and I think the citizens will support him. Why is that? Because we're tired. We're tired of alternating one party for the next, every 5 years or however any intervals and so on, and still get a Petrodram. Coming off of a zinc scandal, a Shell waiver, a net serve, and the list goes on and on. We want someone, I, as a post-independence person myself, want someone on the bridge who is going to give us good governance, and the byproducts of that good governance is going to be real prosperity in terms of lifting the well-being and living conditions of the majority of the people. That's what we're looking for. That's what the hope is, basically. So, in going further, we have to now, I say, have a situation of engaged citizenship. The late Tony Leng used to say, Jamaica is like a company, and the citizens are the shareholders, but we left it up. We left it up.
Left it up.
As citizens and as the shareholders of Jamaica, we need to take back the country in the sense that in a democracy, the governed govern with the consent of the people. Those who are in government, they govern with the consent of the people. And so, whereas in theory they are our servants and we are the masters, the script has been flipped, where the leaders in the main behave like our masters. They zip past us in traffic with outriders, and we sit there, and so on and so forth. It really ought not to be. So my point is this, that the citizenry, it has been said by one of a public figure, that there are 63 persons in the parliament, 21 in the lower house and 62 in the upper, in the lower and upper, right, 21, 62. 63 and 2.8 million people. How do we allow 63 persons to basically, to be in charge? In the sense that, we the citizens, and this is where I'm arguing for active citizenry in terms of holding our leaders to account. You know that we have seen examples of people power in Jamaica? Mm-hmm. Yes, and we should use those examples to build our confidence, to give instructions to our leaders. If we have employees at our homes, we give them instructions.
Yes.
We should give instructions to our leaders that we will not have this.
So we need to recalibrate and know who is boss and who is it.
That on the one hand. And so the citizens, but how do you get citizen education? It has to be the case where, because you see, as an educator, I argue that each of us, we have to act in our domains of competence and in our domains of influence. I can't go and do legal work.
Yes.
I'm an educator.
Stay in your lane.
Stay in your lane. But you expect other conscious lawyers to advance the reparations argument, for example.
Yes.
And then me now as an educator and other educators to say, well then, that when we interface with students and when we interface with other persons in our spheres, whether it's parent-teachers associations and other type interactions, is that we make clear what the duties and expectations and responsibilities of citizens are, that you need not take this thing. You know, one of the things that I find flabbergasting is how we as Jamaicans accept the poor performance of municipal corporations.
Yes.
As a case in point. They are pathetic.
Yes.
Look at Halfway Tree, as a case in point, and so on and so forth. And you go across the different parishes and you see the absolute impotence of the local authorities.
So if we don't show our strength, then we're going to get away with it.
If we left it up, we will continue to get what we have been getting.
Yes. So we get what we deserve.
Yes, so I'm not calling for revolution and people going in the streets to create mayhem and all those type of things.
Yes.
I'm just simply talking about the normal expectations of a citizen in a country to demand good governance.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Let me, as we look at solutions, as we come and we point to some of the distractions. The education thing, I want to come back. That thing I forgot mash up. That teaching of the decolonization of our education system. As it started, we have heard of creative thinking now and thinking outside the box, and GSAT and CSEC, and teachers are now where they are. So have our students give us critical thinking. Is there a role and a space for that? Are we doing anything? Are we tinkering with that even?
We are still tinkering. One of the things that we need to do, you know, that have been at the tertiary level for quite some time now. I've been head of a tertiary institution that involves teacher training. Our teacher training curriculum needs to be looked at, because if you are putting out agents who are to be agents of change, but they are not functioning as agents of change, then you've got a problem. So we need to look at how we train those persons who are going to be influencing our students. Then you come now to parents. The home is the first school. I have a daughter, and I must tell you that other than for the standard provisions of a father, one of the things that I'm most proud of in giving to my daughter is a sense of confidence in herself as a black woman. She eschews artificial hair. She don't want it.
Here. God bless her.
She don't want it. She don't want war paint as makeup. And I might get in trouble for saying these things.
It's all right.
But the point I'm making is that an acceptance of self. And I use that example to say that parenting is a big work. And part of parenting goes beyond providing food, clothing, and shelter. Part of parenting involves not indoctrination, but a formatting of the minds of your children to be conscious that they think about things that are in front of them. My daughter was halfway across the island at boarding school. I bought her a computer, and she did well in CSEC and was now at sixth form, so I bought her a computer as a little gift.
As your reward, yes.
Right. She dropped the computer, or the computer fell and was malfunctioning. Yes. And she took it to the lab tech there to try to get it fixed. But in him tinkering with it would have voided the warranty. But I didn't get upset with her.
Yes.
I said, here you are, halfway across the island away from your parents, but you were taking action to solve a problem.
Yes.
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 So you have to format the kids so that they think, so that they don't become little mimic men.
Yes.
And little mimic girls running around playing with white dolls and all them kind of foolishness.
Yes.
And looking to see other representations of beauty that are outside their race.
You're saying that while we call on government to do things, the governance really starts in the home.
Yes.
And we're going to take a break because we want to find out who is this man. Welcome. I'll be right back on Insight.
Welcome. I'm talking these things.
Welcome back to Insight. We reached the final stage here, talking to a gentleman who bothered to write a book called Jamaica, Paradise and Paradox. Paul Ivey, how many books have you written?
7.
7 books.
This is my 7th book.
It's your 7th book.
Yes.
And where do you get this from? Where do you get this desire and love to want to write?
I think the foundation of my writing started with reading. When I was a little boy, growing up in Yorton, St. Catherine, that's where I'm from, my mother realized that I had this curiosity and liked to read stuff, looking into things. And she worked at Ayfield Village, which was a residential community for the expatriates and professionals who worked at the bauxite company, Alkian. She worked with them. Every weekend or end of the work day, whenever they were finished with Steel Gleaner newspapers,
Yes.
and other reading materials, she would bring them to me. My brothers and myself would go and meet her in the evenings, and she would be carrying stuff, whether it was frozen ice or dog food or whatever.
Yes.
And she would hand the other things to the others. And she would hand me my pile of reading materials.
Okay.
And so the foundation of my reading, I got to read and discover that there was a wider world out there beyond my little district, and that there were ideas that were interesting in what one read. In primary school, I wrote interesting compositions, as we call them. So I was always writing, but I didn't know that I would actually end up writing books. But I was always able to express myself reasonably well in writing, always ahead of my peers. I failed the common entrance exam twice. I went to Yorton Secondary School, didn't go to any of these brand name schools that fighting over champs and so on.
Never mind.
And so I eventually got opportunities that led to an associate degree, a bachelor's degree, master's degree, a second master's degree, and a doctor of philosophy. So I've had all those educational opportunities. So I said to myself, after a while, someone who came from my background, with my antecedents, going to primary school barefooted at times, failing the common entrance twice, coming to the pinnacle of the academic ladder, including being president of a college I attended. That story. This is the College of Agriculture Science and Education, Case.
Yes.
I went to COA before the upgrade to Case, and then I graduated from the college in 1987, and in 2004 was named president.
There you go.
Right, and I hold that record still.
Yes.
But so the point I'm making is that looking at the arc of my life, I said this is a remarkable story that must be told to inspire others.
Yes.
So I wrote my autobiography in 2015.
Okay.
And the trigger for my autobiography was the passing of my mother. She passed in 2013. She had outlived my father by 20 years. So Harold Ivey, Enid Ivey, they were a couple that took care of all the kids they had together. I have 4 sisters, I have 4 brothers, so 9 of us. And they were singularly dedicated to our welfare. The expatriates that my mother worked with at one time offered to take her to Canada to work with them. And her immediate answer was, no, I can't leave my children.
Yes.
Some people in the community said that she passed up a wonderful opportunity. So I'm getting to make it the point that in addition to writing my story to inspire others, it was a tribute to my parents.
Yes.